Okay, Mr. Schmidt, do you want to kind of kick us off on where we are now in this and then turn it
Yes.
over to the folks?
Yes, Chair
Thank you.
Parks and members of the committee, welcome back. So we are adjusting the schedule slightly. We're jumping ahead to what was noticed around the 1 o'clock hour, and that is operating departments primarily funded by fees and grants, namely Department of Transportation and Development and Health, Housing, Human Services. And we will do these two departments until around 11:15, 11:20, and then we'll take the recess. So Elizabeth and Sandra, please go ahead.
Thank you, Administrator Schmidt. Again, Elizabeth Comfort, Finance Director for the county. Our next two departments that we're going to speak to are primarily funded by grants and fees. As we've been doing these groupings, we're talking about their revenue sources. This first one is our Department of Transportation and Development, also referred to as DTD. They have a large budget, as you can see, $253 million this current year, with $272 million budgeted for fiscal year 23-24. Their primary revenue sources are other grants and fees. In the next year, it's $264 million. If you saw in their program profiles of the budget packet, all except for 6 programs are funded by restricted dollars. Those are federal grants, other grants, and specific fees and rates. Let's see, they had a reduction of $700,000. That was 8.8%. And how they determined the best reductions was through land use, alternate money for long-range planner. And again, the team is sitting behind me, so if there are more specific questions, we can ask them. Reduced a surveyor position. Parks, alternate monies for 11 seasonal positions, and also eliminated 3 positions in the new budget in dog services. Their cost allocation charges did increase. As we've talked about several times, we upgraded the drivers for all the departments. The allocation charges had been held frozen for 3 years, so this was a combination of updating those drivers and updating the charges for the costs for the 22-23 amounts. And then they also have a one-time subsidy of $350,000 to offset that significant increase to the cost allocations. The next department is Health, Housing, and Human Services. And I think Chair Smith talked about we receive millions of dollars in grants from federal, in addition to DTD. Those grants go to our H3S department. There are a lot of terrific programs for our county that are ran through H3S. Their budget this current year was $243 million, and it's an increase of $309.5 million. Majority of that increase is due to the supportive housing measure, the tax dollars that started in 2021. That collection has increased, and also we have a large carryover that'll be carried over of unspent dollars in this fiscal year, carried over into next year, and then the full year of tax collections in 23-24 to be programmed in that fiscal year. So their general fund support is minimal compared to their other revenue sources of $10 million, where their other revenues, grants primarily, are $300 million. We asked them to reduce their general fund support by $1,500,000, and they did that through a number of reductions, eliminating positions, as you see there, eliminated some of the programs. And they also reduced material and services expenses. And as you see, the second from the bottom is they are using and seeking other alternate funds if possible. And that's what we've also asked. So there are multiple ways to fund our expenses and programs. And so we are seeking what are those alternative revenue sources. So their cost allocations also went up. They had a significant number of FTE increases due to the COVID response. Those were not recognized during 3 fiscal years, but again, refreshing the drivers and updating the cost allocation charges, that they did see a significant increase from 8.6 million to just over 11 million. We did give, Gary authorized out of general fund a subsidy for $1,250,000 to soften that increase to their new rate of cost allocation charges. And that concludes my presentation of these two departments.
I have a question about the reductions in H3S. So are those like, I see, for instance, of course, that eliminate the contract for children of incarcerated parents. So that's gone. They're not doing anything there. Eliminate the grants coordinator position. I mean, are there other, is that one position out of a number of them? It would seem to me that an organization that is based on, grants and other things like that would need people to help manage those. I mean, having managed just one grant back when I ran the chamber, I know how involved they are. So I just want to check in on that.
I would invite Rod or anyone from your staff to please come forward to address this.
Yeah, so as you're speaking to that, do you mind speaking to the other reductions on there and whether that's the entire focus of that program or if that's paring it back or?
Yes, I'll speak from the departmental level because it's across multiple divisions. But the specific one you asked first on the grants coordinator, that's out of Adam Freer's division. So I'll have him speak to that and then I'll speak to the rest of them, if that's okay.
Good morning, Adam Freer, Division Director for
Yeah,
Children.
be sure you put the microphones close to you and
Apologies.
speak directly into them. Thank you so much.
Sure. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to this. I'm Adam Freer. I'm the Division Director for Children, Family, Community Connections. And yes, the children of incarcerated parents and the program position are within our division. We were funding the program coordinator position out of our marijuana tax funds, and we had some reserved some, and as Rod has mentioned in a previous meeting, we had blended and braided, and we were able to get additional funding so that we didn't need a certain amount. And so the funding that this had been used for in the past was not needed, so we were able to allow that funding to be taken to meet the need.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
I'm sorry, did you eliminate then? So is the grant coordinator still existing, but it's being funded differently?
Yeah, sorry if that was confusing. Yes, the position still exists.
And I guess I would think, and help me if I'm wrong here, that in an organization, a department that subsists on a wide variety of grants and federal and state monies, that type of thing, that within each of those, there is a team that works on it, and amongst that would be a grant coordinator for that particular grant. I mean, you don't have people just writing grants. You've got people carrying out the function that the grants provide.
That is correct. In this case, we were using county general funds to subsidize the grant funds in order to, again, blend and braid, and it provided us some flexibility. And so this funding was not used to achieve a particular grant end. We were able to get sufficient grant funding to fully cover the positions that we needed.
Okay, all right, thank you. I appreciate that.
Sure.
Go ahead.
And quickly on the rest of these, eliminate dollars for the built environments and health environment. That's out of public health. That's a unit that they have and a process they were doing to deal with all the climate control, brownfields, those type of issues. And they've helped out with DTD in some cases where we had a partnership with them to basically go out and do analysis of fields and areas and how we're going to affect how different new developments might affect the health of a certain area. So that that function is not being funded through general fund anymore. Philip's here, so to that one, Philip, is that function gone? Or why don't we switch, we'll play tag with the.
Yeah, I do need to do
Yeah,
CIP
okay.
as well.
Good morning, Philip Mason Joyner, Public Health Director with Clackamas County. This position, there was 2 FTE, 2 positions previously, and with this reduction, there will now, that position, there'll now only be one position. So we have eliminated 1 position. The position being eliminated has been vacant for over a year.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Okay, and the next one is retired senior volunteer program. Is Brenda in the room? And sorry for so many, but we have a lot of divisions, and I'm sure you want to hear specificity, so.
Good morning, Brenda Durbin, Social Services Director. The Retired Senior Volunteer Program is slated to be eliminated in this proposed budget. The Retired Senior Volunteer Program is sort of a matchmaker between community members who want to volunteer and nonprofit and county programs who need volunteers to support that work. So what we're going to lose is the recruitment and retention function that RSVP provided. Social Services will continue to run 4 programs that rely on volunteers, but we're going to have to make some changes on that recruitment and retention piece. We're also going to lose the ability to support a number of community partners, including the Gleaners and several food banks that utilize the RSVP program, again, to recruit and train volunteers to support their programs.
Okay, all right, thanks. Let me stop for a second, and we have 3 people who want to speak, and it's in order: Jan Lee, then Commissioner Smith, and then Commissioner West.
My question was answered because I had a concern about losing the grants coordinator. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Jan. Commissioner West, or excuse me, Commissioner Smith, and then Commissioner West.
So my understanding is that, Rod, in your department, you are able to substitute other funds for some of your general fund positions, correct?
Correct.
And how many of those positions did you find other funding for?
I'd have to get back
Well,
to you
there
on
is a
the.
number. I mean, I think I know what it is. It's quite large.
Oh, you mean the 67 total?
I think that needs to be brought up, because in your department and another department that we have not heard from yet, the directors, including yourself, adeptly found grant funding to fund general fund positions, and I'd like to know what that number is.
I don't know if we have it, or we can, if we don't have it in the room, we'll get it for you. It was overall, we had vacancies, and there was a rather large number if you look at that number. But in terms of actual human beings who were affected, I think we're down to, I think it's 4 individuals who.
Excuse me, how many?
4 who are actually looking at layoff, because we actually looked at other funding, we looked at fund balances, we looked at every other opportunity to keep programs intact where that made sense and where we could. In the cases where you see these, after excruciating time with staff, with the community, everybody involved, these were the only ones we were left on the table that we could cut from. And so you see Children of Incarcerated Parents, long-standing program, but that's a nonprofit runs that, and we just didn't have the funds to keep that intact. And then you have Prevent Net Plus, that's an in-school program. We didn't have funds to keep that intact. We hope that the community, that the schools, in the case of the school program, will pick it up. We hope with the other, I've been in touch with Rose Fuller, or she's been in touch with me. She may be here tonight. But in Incarcerated Parents, that's a well-loved program in the community. I think they're already looking for other funding sources. But with what we had, the 1.5 that we had to cut, these are the, I don't want to say they're lesser programs, but of all the things, that we could have cut, these were the most prudent, because in other areas, had we cut a piece of it, it would have really lost the total program to Clackamas County. So that's kind of how we went through our process, tough process, but we think we've done due diligence in that regard.
Well, I
So
saw-
the number that, let me
I'm sorry,
finish.
yeah.
The number that I would be most interested in is how many positions you were able to find other funding sources for, because this document doesn't say that. And then let's compare that to the overall positions at H3S, because this is our largest department.
Right.
And there are a lot of employees, and I suspect redundant services. And I suspect that also one position may have had two different funding sources, as was revealed to us. So I think we've done a miraculous cleanup in eliminating inefficiencies and redundancies, especially in this department. And thank you for that, Rod. You really exhibited some leadership in that. So, staff, I need those two numbers. Thank you very much.
Yeah, and I thank you for that, Commissioner Smith, because that's what I'm sitting here thinking too, is that the edict was kind of like, we've got to eliminate these from the GF, but if you can find a way to keep these people in these positions, more power to you, and you've been able to do that. For me, you don't have to go through the rest of the list, because I can see how well thought out all that was and everything. But we do have two more comments, first from Commissioner West and then from Commissioner Schrader. So thank you.
Rod, thank you for your leadership. I know this wasn't easy. My question and statement are really in our alignment with Chair Smith's question is, when possible, are we talking about these essential preventative programs? I think this is about prevention. These programs get downstream early on before we have adverse outcomes. Are those, which is, just for the record, I believe is much more economical to get it early on than to deal with chronic issues later in process. I think we all agree on that. Are these being, you mentioned maybe the mantle might be picked up by other partners, so it's not like the programs don't exist anymore, but other allies, partners, people in the community may be stepping up to carry this forward. We're just not funding it in the way we did previously. And then I think that ties a little bit into Chair Smith's comments about really knowing about where we found those redundancies, and you guys were able to preserve so much of the work you do because of other funding sources that weren't general fund. I don't know if you could speak to that.
To the first point, with this year, and then again, it's going to be next year, we're looking for where we can outsource some of the work that the county, we're doing with county employees. We outsource that to nonprofits, where theoretically, anyway, it's cheaper, and it's more, they have a little bit more flexibility in how they do that. So we hope this year, you'll see more of us offloading some of the work we do now to put that out. Non-mandated services was one of the criteria we were looking at. And so in the case of, like I said, in children's incarcerated parents, which I was totally involved at the beginning of it, there are multiple agencies who care about that issue. We were one of the partners. Us pulling out is still devastating to them, and like I said, you may hear that from community, but there are others still keeping that movement moving forward. So those are the type of things we have to look at as we move forward. Your second question?
I think it was more of a let me get to that in a second.
Okay.
Can you break down a little bit what the contract children of incarcerated, the elimination of the contract children of incarcerated parents is specifically, and what service is at risk because that's been eliminated?
Yes, that program identifies children. Say, I'll give you a quick example. If sheriff goes in and arrests a father, abusive father, the child is left there, and they're experiencing trauma. So this group comes in immediately, identifies that child, and then wraps services around that child. That may happen in the school environment, that may happen in the home environment, that may happen for the whole family, but it's really a triage of, we know this child, and if we don't get to that child right then, the trajectory of that child is probably going to lead them to incarceration as well down the road. That's what research would show. So they're interrupting that and providing that service. So that's why it's been such a critical program and a well-loved program.
How much of a hit are they actually going to take when we pull out?
I believe our I think we were giving them $90,000 a year.
How much of that budget is that, how much of that is their, how much does that make up their budget, do we know?
Of their total budget?
Wait, we give them 90,000 of their 120,000 budget. Has that been replaced by another community member yet?
Yeah, I would
How many
doubt
children
it.
how many children does this program serve? Are these children often in foster care or in and out of the system?
They're likely to be touched by the system.
To be eligible, the parents have to be incarcerated.
And we're getting and helping these children, the most vulnerable population, really downstream, and the primary source of funding for this population that has not been replaced comes from the county.
We'd have to check with Northwest Family Services on the current funding levels and other sources. We're not privy to that right now.
I'm just going to say this, I know I'm just diving into this. I am not in a place where I am comfortable cutting these funds. Like, I just cannot get there on this. I can't do that.
Yeah, and
I don't know what we got to do.
yeah.
Did you find the money, Mr. West, to supplement what you don't want to cut? I would be more than happy to sit with you and discuss that. As Gary said in the beginning, you know, I'm not comfortable with a lot of this stuff too, but I'm going to caution you. It's one thing to make these huge statements. I don't want to fund this because I disagree with it and my emotions are involved. You know, all of our emotions are involved in this. But if you want to find some other funding sources that another department doesn't need, that's what your task will be.
I hear you. I agree with you. Thank you for that statement, that calming statement. I just need to let you guys know on this issue, I'm not comfortable.
Yeah, a lot of us aren't comfortable, Ben.
Okay.
But this budget, like he says, was in the making for 6 months, and there's been many reiterations of this budget that has come through that we've all looked at, and this is probably the best place that we can get, as Commissioner Savas says, in this particular point in time.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And I do appreciate your advocacy for certain departments.
Commissioner Schrader?
Yeah, actually, thank you.
Speak into the
Mr.
microphone,
West.
please.
Speak into the microphone.
Yep. Thank you, Commissioner West, for these comments, because Rod was here when we first started this with Debbie Marston back in, 2004? I don't know, it was a long time ago. It's been a successful program, and it was initiated largely because they were seeing, children foster what you just described as trauma. So I guess my question to Rod is, Northwest Family Services is the umbrella agency, right?
Yes.
That is at least
Correct.
administering the program. So we could work together to see if we can find money elsewhere from our budget, or we can work directly with them and see what we can do with the rest of the community. It is, I don't know, of course, I am emotionally attached to this program because it was something that we got some seed money for, but I understand the duress our budget is under, and we're going to have to figure something out. So it's either find someplace else to cut, or contact the umbrella agencies that are our nonprofits and see what we can do as leaders in this community to see if we can help them backfill via other, opportunities. And Ron, I also wanted to ask about PreventNet Plus. Could you just describe what that is and what umbrella nonprofit is working with that?
I don't know the full history of that, but those funds were used to fund family resource coordinators through our early learning work. And they did, the family resource coordinators worked with low-income families to address a range of needs, connect them to a variety of services and resources that they need to stabilize and become healthier and stronger. And the County General Fund was matching some funding that we were receiving from the state, and that funding was cut. And so we spent most of last year trying to find additional sources, working with our partners, and we were unable to find that. That funding ended in December of last year. And so we still had this, the county general funds coming, and it was no longer being used. So that was, when the need came, that's why we offered that up.
So basically, the state also cut funding for this particular program.
It came out of the Kindergarten Partnership Innovation Initiative funding, KPI funding.
Did it involve visitations to homes and working with people with young children who needed more parenting skills? I know I've gone on some home visits. I'm wondering, was that part of that umbrella?
It was not inherently home visiting. It could be. My understanding is most of the services were provided in schools.
Okay, so the ESD, Clackamas County ESD is probably heavily involved in this, I would suspect, or has a role in this? As a school, as the provider of these kinds of services for the overall education system for every district in the county?
They are part of the Early Learning Hub that really started this program and held it up. I don't believe that they're investing in these particular programs because these are more kind of wraparound.
Right.
They are inherently educational. It's to address issues that affect a child's readiness for kindergarten and ability to fully engage in school.
Yeah, and I just do want to mention, there's national dollars available for this through the National Association of Counties, so I'll take a look into that and see. I imagine if it's cut or right now hiatus, I would suggest, Commissioner, maybe you and I could do some digging into some of those larger initiatives and see if there's ways that we can at least, if a nonprofit's involved in particular, it'd be really good to funnel the money to them if we could, or help out with that.
Hi.
Cut or find the money someplace else, basically.
I want to keep us on track as much as possible. We are scheduled just for, actually, we're a little bit over what we thought on our second
Okay.
turn on the schedule.
So I have nothing else to add.
Really quick, Chair.
Yeah. And then Mr. Rhodes.
I want to, I know we're all trying to be solutions-oriented. I trust the intent and the desire of all of my colleagues to do the best by this population. I hope that we can find a way to sharpen our pencils, whether within the budget process or some other funding sources or partnering with nonprofits. I believe so deeply in my core that prevention is key to adverse outcomes in the future, and it's cheaper now to figure out how to not eliminate some of this than to have to deal with chronic situations down the road. And so I hope that we can work together to find solutions here for these funding sources and maybe get to work a little harder on this issue. But I just want to make sure I'm advocating for this population today in the budget process.
Thank you, Commissioner. Mr. Rhodes, and then Commissioner Shull.
Thank you. Thank you for all the good work that you do. Specifically to these three programs, the Retired Senior Volunteer Program, the Children Incarcerated Parents, and the Prevent Net Plus program. Can you provide, maybe not instantly, but soon, to this committee, the individual dollar amounts for each of those programs that would need to be restored to your budget to restore that to its current level?
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you.
Commissioner Shull.
That's in your packet already, members. It's in tab,
You have two.
it's in tab 28.
Right, and I have two of them right here. For the Prevent Net Plus, it's 100,000,
Okay.
and for children of incarcerated parents, it's 90,000.
Mm-hmm.
Very much. See that, the first one again?
Prevent Net Plus is 100,000.
Thank you.
Commissioner Shull.
Yes, Chair Parks. As we go through the budget today, tomorrow, we're looking at examining the administrator's budget, hopefully approving it on Thursday if it works, if it's balanced. There's going to be many things that were effected in order to come up with these adjustments regarding allocated costs that we're going to have to look at later, not this week, that will result potentially in a supplemental budget for these departments that are now losing something. But we have the opportunity to build them back up when we can find the funds later on.
Okay, I see no other cards up, no other questions. Thank you for being with us today and for listening to our questions and answering them the best you can. I think there was something that's going to come back to us. You were asking for this.
Yes, we have one more program that we'll get
later
done.
with-
done.
yeah, some
Oh,
info.
you found it? Okay. Okay.
Okay,
All right.
all right, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it very much. Administrator Schmidt.
So Chair, we will recess until 1:30 PM. That's 30 minutes later than the schedule states, but 1:30 PM we'll reconvene.
1:30, we'll be back in here, get the rest of it. All right.